This second story is a story that I often tell in schools, usually in secondary schools, but it's a good story. It's about a young man this time, because we don't want to make all the stories about young women, do we? Okay? But he was also a farmer, as I imagine many stories from old China would be about. And he worked very hard in the fields every single day. And one day he came home and he said to his mother, he said, "Mum, why is it I work so hard every single day, and yet at the end of every year I am no richer and no happier than I was this time last year?" And he turned to his mother and he said, "Mum, what must I do to become rich and happy?" And his mother said, "Oh, that's a very good question." And it is a good question, isn't it? Would you like to know how to be rich and happy? Of course you would, yes. Would you like to know how to be rich and happy? Oh, of course you'd like to know how to be rich and happy, wouldn't you? Yes. Is there anybody in the room who doesn't want to be rich and happy? Of course not. So pay attention, because this story will give you the secret. Okay? And you thought you were just coming to listen to a story. His mother said, "It's a very good question, but I don't know the answer." And the young man went, "Huh? But you're my mum. I thought mums know everything." "Oh, they do? Okay, not this mum. It's a good job you're not in the story, otherwise we'd end right here." Okay. She said, "This question is too big. It's too complicated. I don't know the answer." "Oh no," said the young man. "But," she said, "why don't you go to ask the wise old man who lives in the mountain?" And the young man said, "Mum, that's a great idea. I'm going to ask the wise old man how to be rich and happy." And that was question number 1. So the next morning, the young man set off. And he walked, and he wandered, and he wandered, and he walked. And late in the afternoon, feeling tired and hungry, he saw a small cottage. So he went to the door, and the door opened, and there was a very kind-looking old woman. She said, "Yes?" He said, "Please, I've been traveling all day. Could I please stay here tonight? I'm very tired." "Of course," she said. Come in, come in. I bet you're hungry too." And the young man said, "I am that." And she welcomed him in. And later that evening, as she gave him a simple meal of some rice, some fish, some vegetables, she asked him where he was from and where he was going. The young man explained that he was on his way to ask the wise old man of the mountain a question. "Oh," she said, "could you ask a question for me, since you're going that way?" And the young man said, "Of course. You've been so kind as to feed me and let me sleep here tonight. I'll be happy to. What would you like to know?" And the woman said, "Well, my daughter, she's not here today. She's visiting her aunt in the town. Ever since my dear husband passed away 4 years ago, my daughter has not smiled or laughed, not even once. Well, what must I do to make my daughter smile again?" And the young man promised that he would ask that question. And that was question number 2. So the next morning, much refreshed, the young man carried on his journey. And he walked, and he wandered, and he walked. And about lunchtime, he came to a hidden valley. And as he walked down the steep and winding path into the valley, he saw ahead of him was a small village. And it was clustered around a magnificent tree. As he grew nearer to the village, he could smell the wood smoke, and he realized the villagers must be preparing their lunch. He suddenly felt hungry. As he grew closer to the village, he passed a small wayside stall. As he did so, the owner came out and said, "Oh, stranger, welcome, welcome, come, sit down, have something to eat." The young farmer said, I'm sorry, I'm just a poor farmer. I don't have much money. Oh, don't worry about that, said the man. I'll be happy to feed you in exchange for some news about what is happening in the world beyond our valley. For this is how it used to be in the days before the internet and newspapers, television. We relied on meeting strangers who would share the news of what they'd heard, what they'd seen. So the young man sat down, and as he was having a simple meal of some rice and some vegetables, the stall owner asked him where he was from and where he was going. And the young man explained that he was on his way to ask the wise old man of the mountain a question. "Oh," said the man, "could you ask a question for me, since you're going that way?" And the young man said, "Of course I can. What would you like to know?" And the man said, "Well, I'm the chief of the clan who lives in this village. And you see that magnificent tree there in the center of the village? Years ago, when I was a young man, every spring, that tree would have the most wonderful flowers. Their fragrance would fill this whole valley. Then, in the summer, we'd see there'd be fruit, and we would watch the fruit grow and ripen throughout the summer, until in the autumn we would pluck the fruit and then we'd make wine. Then, after that, in the winter, with the wine there'd be singing and dancing. But now," he said, "no more. Not for more years than I can remember. No flowers in the spring. No flowers in the spring, no fruit in the summer. No fruit in the summer, no wine in the autumn. No wine, no singing, no dancing in winter. What must we do," he said, "to make our tree flower again?" And that was question number 3. Very good. So after his lunch, the young man carried on, and he wandered, and he walked, and he walked, and he wandered, until he came to a river. The river was wide, and the water flowing very fast. He looked, and he thought, "Gosh, how can I get across? There's no boat." He could see in the distance on the far side, there were the mountains where lived the wise old man. And as he stood there, wondering how to get across, suddenly he saw a dragon. And the young man looked up and said, "Please, please don't eat me." The dragon said, "Why would I eat you? I am a good dragon. I help people. Why are you here?" And the young man explained that he was on his way to ask the wise old man of that mountain a question. And the dragon said, "Oh, I'll carry you across the river if you'll ask a question for me." And the young man said, "Deal. What is your question? What would you like to know?" The dragon said, "I have lived a long and useful life. For 888 years, I have helped people. Now I am tired. I would like to fly up and enter heaven. But every time I approach the gates of paradise, they close them shut. What must I do to enter heaven?" And the young man promised that he would ask that question. And that was question number 4. And incidentally, this story is called the 4th question. So the young man clambered up on the dragon's back, and the dragon, unlike the dragons that I grew up with, because although I was born here in Singapore, my parents were English or Welsh, and I grew up in UK, the dragons that I grew up with all have wings, but Chinese dragons don't have wings, do they? So don't ask me how they fly, you need to ask this young lady here, is obviously an expert, okay? And the dragon carried him across the river to the mountains, because, as I said, he was very helpful, all the way to the mountain. So it was not long after he dismounted that the young man found the wise old man. He was working in his field. He looked up. He saw the young man and said, "Oh, welcome, come. Why are you here?" The young farmer said, "Sir, I've come to ask you some questions." "Oh, good questions. Yes. How many questions?" And the young farmer said, "How many questions?" "4. And the old man said, "Oh, no, stop. He said, No, you can't. The rule of the mountain is, you can only ask me 3 questions. And don't ask me why, otherwise that would be your first question." Oh dear. Only 3 questions, but he's got 4. If it was you, which question wouldn't you ask? Okay, let me just have a recap, because some people may not have been paying attention or were falling asleep. Here we go. There's his own question. Obviously you're going to ask that, how to be rich and happy. Then there's the woman who's got a daughter who doesn't smile. There's the man in the village that's got a tree that doesn't have fruit. And there's the dragon that wants to enter heaven. So which question don't you ask? Sorry? You don't ask the dragon question. Hello. If you don't ask the dragon question, how are you going to get back across the river? Because he won't carry you back, that's for sure. Okay, let's try another one. I don't want to, because here, this young lady. Yes, that's you. Yeah, young lady. Yes. Sorry. Your own question. Are you crazy? Are you crazy? This is the whole reason you've come on this long journey. Okay, let's ask a more intelligent person over here. Which question would you not ask? You don't want to know. Come on, tell me, which question wouldn't you ask? It's very hard. Which one? Oh dear me, she's thinking. Yes. Come on this way. Which one? First, second, third, or fourth? Second question. That's, oh my goodness me, this woman, she invited you into the house, she fed you, and you promised, and you're not. What school does he go to? Don't they teach him any values? I'm shocked. Okay. The old man said, "Come on, we don't have much time. Come. So the young man said, "All right. Question number 1. There's a dragon, okay, has lived a long and useful life, wants to enter heaven, but every time they say, no, you may not enter. He wants to know what he must do to enter heaven." And the old man said, "Oh, that's a simple question," he said. "Tell the dragon to remove the great pearl that is on his forehead, for no one may enter heaven, bringing with them earthly riches." And the young man said, all right, yes, of course. And the old man said, "And your second question?" And the young man said, "Well, yes, I was thinking that there's a village. And in the middle of the village, there's this magnificent tree. And years ago, it used to have the most wonderful fruit, and the people would make wine, and then they would have singing and dancing. But for many years, there have been no flowers in the spring. So they want to know how to make the tree flower again." And the old man looked at the young farmer and said, "Oh, that's another easy question," he said. "Years ago, a band of robbers came to the village in the middle of the night, and they buried their great sacks of gold all around the tree. Now, the weight of the gold is pressing on those roots. Tell the villagers to remove the sacks of gold, and the tree will flower again." "Oh, thank you," said the young man. And the wise old man looked at him and said, "And now your third and final question." And the young man said, that I want. There's a woman. She has a daughter. And ever since the girl's father passed away 4 years ago, the daughter has not smiled or laughed. Not even once. Naturally, the mother wants to know, what must I do to make her daughter smile again? And the wise old man said, Oh. Oh dear, he said. That's a very difficult question. No, I'm afraid, he said, there's nothing the old woman can do. Nothing? Said the young man. No, I'm afraid not, said the wise old man. But whether her daughter smiles again is completely beyond her control. Oh dear, said the young farmer. But the wise old man said, you can tell the woman this. Her daughter will smile again, but only on the day when she first sees her future husband. Oh, okay, thank you. So he said farewell to the wise old man. Thank you very much, sir, he said. And he started to walk down the mountain, and he hadn't gone very far when he met the dragon. Did you ask my question? Yes, I did. Good job you did, otherwise you'd be in big trouble. And the young man said, first you are going to fly me back across the river, because if I tell you now, you'll fly up there, and I'm going to be stuck here. So he clambered on the dragon's back, and the dragon took him across the river and put him down. And when he had dismounted, the young man said, Dragon, it's simple. Remove that great pearl from your forehead, for no one may enter heaven, bringing with them earthly riches. And the dragon stretched out an enormous claw and ripped that pearl from his forehead. And he went to throw it into the river and stopped and said, Here, you have the pearl, for you have greater need of it than I. And he threw it to the young man, who caught it and put it in his pocket. And the dragon, by that strange Chinese method, which is probably part of that technology that they're so keen to develop at the moment, began to fly up and disappeared. And the young man walked on with a great pearl in his pocket. And when he got to the village, there was the chief standing, and he said, Well, did you ask my question? And the young man smiled and said, Yes, I did, and told him about the robbers and the sacks of gold. And the chief summoned the villagers, and they began to dig, and they dug, and they dug, and they dug, and they found dirt. So they dug, and they dug, and they dug, and they found the sacks of gold. And as they lifted these sacks up, they were so happy, for they knew that their tree would flower again in the spring. And the young man turned to the chief and said, I must be on my way. And the chief said, Stop. And he bent down and he picked up one of those great sacks of gold. And he said to the young man, Here, you take this, for without you, we wouldn't have known how to save our tree and to make it flower again. And so, with a pearl in his pocket and a great sack of gold under his arm, but with a heavy heart, this young man walked on, because he knew that he had bad news to give the woman. She was waiting outside her door. When she saw him, her face lit up, and she said, Well, did you ask my question? The young man said, Yes, I did, but it's a sort of a good news, bad news situation. Oh dear, she said. What's the bad news? And the young man said, the wise old man says, whether your daughter laughs or smiles again is completely out of your control. There's nothing you can do. Oh no, said the woman, that's terrible, nothing. I'm afraid not, said the farmer. Oh no, but if that's the bad news, what's the good news? And the farmer said, the wise old man says your daughter will smile again, but only on the day when she first sees her future husband. Oh no, she said, when will that be? I'm an old woman. I do apologize for keep pointing because you're not an old woman, but there you are. I'm an old woman, she said. And we live out in the middle of nowhere. I might be dead before that happens. And at that moment, the door of the cottage opened. And standing in the doorway was this extremely beautiful young lady. And when she saw the young farmer, she smiled. And she even kind of flashed her eyebrows, which is very nice. I like that. And she smiled, and he smiled at her and said, Ni hao. And the girl looked at him, and she looked at her mother, and she said, Mom, please introduce us. Who is this man? And her mother looked at her daughter, who was smiling from ear to ear, and she looked at the young man, and she said, Daughter, meet your future husband. You're getting married tomorrow morning. And the two youngsters said, okay. And so they were married. And that's how the young man came home with a pearl in his pocket, a great sack of gold under his arm, and a beautiful young wife beside him. And that's how he found the answer to the fourth question.